So we are very lucky to have Tom Colicchio here today. He's actually in the middle of opening a restaurant, and he came down just for this. So we are so glad to have him here. I feel like we pretty much have to start with the presidential campaign here because, I mean, if I'm guessing everyone like you, like me, is still thinking about the debate last night. And obviously, while it was very engrossing, there was not a lot of conversation about food, was there?
No, not much. There wasn't much conversation about much last night, though. Yeah, that was kind of, the question is who won or lost that debate. I think it's kind of unanimous that America kind of lost that debate last night. So, yeah.
And of course, we have this food movement now, right? And it's pretty difficult to define the food movement. You and I were just talking about that. But there are a lot of people now who do see these ties between public health crises, environmental costs, unfair wages for workers. People are rallying around these issues, connecting the dots. So how do you make this a political issue for people? Because right now it is not even in the top 10 concerns of voters. Food does not factor in there.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So if you look at most social movements, whether it was marriage equality, civil rights, they usually start off as social movements and then eventually move into political movements. And so the question is, what levers do you pull to actually move these issues more into the politics? We started Food Policy Action 5 years ago. It's an organization that is focused on the politics and policies around food. So we publish a scorecard. So we grade Congress on how they vote around food issues. Our first scorecard, people kind of ignored us. By the second scorecard, we started to hear some grumblings. Third scorecard, we started hearing people say, well, if I knew someone was keeping score, I would have voted differently. So we knew we were onto something. And then we really thought that if someone lost an election around food issues, whether it was labeling or subsidies or trying to cut food stamps, we could actually get people to pay attention. And that happened last cycle. We actually did get involved in one race in Florida, and Gwen Graham won by a couple thousand votes, and we think we helped make a difference. And so we're C4, so we can get directly involved in races.
And what was the food issue in that particular race?
Cutting food stamps. Stephen Sutherland, he tried to put a bill into the Farm Bill. That's where our nutrition programs are in the Farm Bill, to try to make sure that you either had to work or be in some kind of work program or work to receive food stamps. That was soundly defeated. And so he did lose his job. Yeah.
And so are you seeing that food stamps, hunger, that dimension of this conversation about food is the one that resonates most with voters, among others?
It is one thing that yes, it does. I think people are starting to look at who is receiving food assistance and why very differently. Part of the reason I got involved, or I got a soapbox to talk about politics was about 5 years ago. My wife and I made a film called A Place at the Table. It was about domestic hunger, and very early on in doing research for the film, we realized that hunger, we have enough food in this country, we have enough resources to feed everyone in this country. What we didn't have is the political will. And then researching, we realized that back in the 70s, we pretty much got rid of hunger in this country. And then it all changed in the 80s. A lot of these programs weren't funded anymore. And so when, I just kind of naively thought, well, if you have 50 million Americans that are struggling to feed themselves, that you can create a constituency out of that. You can get these people to vote on this issue. You certainly could create a pretty large groundswell. Even if you eliminate the 16 million children who can't vote that are living in households that struggle to feed themselves, and again, not realizing that this demographic typically doesn't get out to vote that often. So then I thought, well, there's this other food movement, this other thing that I'm involved in on the other side. People that care about certain making the food system better, making it more equitable, which that food movement kind of started more more of as an elitist movement and really talked about organics and things like that, and somehow that needed to come more towards the center. And can you knit these two together? And that's kind of how food policy action started. This idea that if you could bring in larger groups of people and figure out how they can work together. So we bring in people from the Humane Society. We bring in people from people who represent farm workers and restaurant workers, and so just kind of broaden it, and we can really create more so instead of these groups working off in their own silos, they can actually come together to actually create or make a suggestion for better food policy.
And so we're at an early stage then of seeing people actually motivating to vote around issues of hunger.
Yeah, hunger and other food issues as well. But I think
insecurity.
Yeah, I think what you have to do, and this is where we're kind of focusing a lot of our efforts now, is, and you mentioned this early on, that food, when you go into the voting booth, food is not something that you're going to go and vote a single issue. People will vote single issue. So then, how do you take these various issues around food and look at them, or at least look at the things that people care about: the economy, healthcare, national security. So you say, well, what does food have to do with any of this? Well, currently, because of the healthcare, take healthcare, we're spending about $200 billion a year on healthcare due to poor diet and lack of nutrition. So certainly, if we were to make some changes, some policy changes, we can start bringing that cost down. So that healthcare, the economy, national security. You say, what does food have to do with national security? 25% of the recruits that show up to join the military wash out because they're not fit to fight. 25%. It's costing us a tremendous amount of money. The environment. Food has a tremendous impact on the environment, the way we produce food. If food production were a country, it would be the number 3 contributor to greenhouse gases. And so once you start looking at food, the way food's produced, the way it's consumed, what we choose to subsidize in this country, all of a sudden these issues that we all care about, you'll see how food starts to impact them. And I think once people understand that, then they may come around to the idea of voting around food issues.
I want to talk about your experience in Washington. Of course, you live in New York, and unlike a lot of chefs who have made big pronouncements about how they want to change the food system, you've actually come to Washington, gotten in the trenches, walked the halls of Congress, and that's pretty unusual. So, what do you think is an advantage of being a chef trying to talk to legislators about food?
Well, I think part of it is I mean, obviously, being on TV helps. But I'm a restaurant owner, a business. I own businesses too, and I own businesses in Florida, California, Las Vegas, and New York. And so that opens a lot of doors because I employ a lot of people. I'm a job creator, and so I can speak from a bunch of different points of view. So I don't go in there and just sort of spout this elitist thing about some organic farming, even though I'm an organic gardener. But you have to actually do more than that. You can't just go in there. You have to figure out a way to talk to both sides of the aisle. You need to figure out a way to talk to people. You can't just go there and say, we should eliminate GMOs, and that's it. That doesn't really get you anywhere. Do
you really think we should, though?
I don't think we should eliminate them. I think that they should be labeled. I don't have an issue so much with the science. I have an issue with the application of the science and how it's taken advantage of in the overuse of glyphosate, things like that. But so going back to labeling, so there is a bill that was signed. The food movement showed up. I think if you look at where that bill was 2 years ago, where we would have gotten nothing, we did make an impact. Is it everything we wanted? Absolutely not. We all wanted, on-package labeling, and we managed to get a little QR code. Still better than nothing. And I think that's where you have to be a realist and realize that you're not going to get everything you want. You have to make a compromise. And I think that's why our political system is broken right now, because compromise is a dirty word. And so I was kind of, as much as I wanted to see on-package labeling, I had wished that some other organizations that were focused on this issue, that they declared victory as opposed to defeat. because I don't think we got defeated here. I think we actually got something. Is it everything? No. And so I think going to Washington, I think you have to go there and with a realization that whatever you want, whatever you're looking for, whatever you're looking to change, it's a 20-year, 30-year process. It's not going to happen overnight.
Was that actually a big surprise when you realized that? That's the long game you're playing?
No, it wasn't so much a big surprise, but I guess I got the first, it's had to be 6-7 years ago, I testified during the CNR, the Childhood Nutrition Reauthorization Act. And I testified with George Miller's, he was just retired, he was a congressman from California, and in his committee. And I was scared to death doing it. And it went really well, and I testified alongside Tom Vilsack and somebody else from the Heritage Foundation, so it was kind of tough. And you got some questions that were asked of you. 5 years later, I was back in Washington, and I was doing a press conference with Chairman, he was at the time Chairman Miller, and he took me aside and he said, "Thanks for coming. You keep coming back." He said, "Most guys like you, celebrities or whatever, they come down once, they get a photo op, and you don't see them again." And he said, "You keep coming back." And he said, "That's the key. You have to keep coming back." And that's when I realized that, even though I was going back because we started this organization. I had to go back, but that's when I realized that this is it is a long game. It's going to take a long time to make these little small changes, and but I think the people don't want to hear that now. They want stuff done immediately, and that's the hard part. Is that you feel like you go there, you spend the whole day, you go from meeting to meeting to meeting. It's kind of crazy if you haven't done this before. I'm a kind of unpaid, unregistered lobbyist at this point. So you go there and you literally go from meeting to meeting to meeting. You go between one building to another building. If you're lucky enough, you get to ride the little rail car underground. It's all great. But you're exhausted at the end of it because you get tired of hearing yourself talk. It's the same thing over and over and over again. No one's asking you a difficult question. I mean, most of the time you're spending the time educating the members of Congress. Their staff typically know what's going on, but the actual members don't really take that much of a deep dive into an issue. Occasionally we'll have someone like Jim McGovern, who's a congressman from Massachusetts. When it comes to hunger issues, he really gets it. And there's other people like Rosa DeLauro who really get it. She's from Congresswoman from Connecticut.
Do you think you're getting meetings with people because of Top Chef?
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, you walk in and the staffers all want to take pictures. Yeah, but then when you sit down and you have actually a serious conversation, they take notice. And when you keep coming back, they take notice. And so that was a lesson to be learned. Yeah, but I enjoy it. But it's, you get on the train and you come back home and you wonder why the hell you're doing it. You bang your head against the wall, and yes, it is the definition of insanity. But my feeling is you got to show up. You got to keep showing up. Yeah.
Well, and of course, DC is a city that is ruled by money, power, and influence. And in your case, you are up against serious food industry money,
yeah,
both in terms of lobbying and marketing. I mean, how do you even begin to fight that?
Sorry. That's the hard part, is trying to sort of move the needle when tons and tons of money is being thrown at you. But again, we did when it came to labeling. We got something, and we were completely outspent. I don't know if anybody read the New York Times Magazine piece that Michael Pollan wrote. It came out this Sunday. He kind of talked about the amount of money that with the Obama administration was up when they wanted to come in and make some changes, and the amount of money that they ran into. It's out there. School lunch. So the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act was signed about 5 years. The school lunch program is a 5-year program, and the Obama administration made some big radical changes. They got some additional funding. They managed to have requirements for whole wheat. took out a lot of sodium, took out a lot of sugar, got vending machines removed from school cafeterias. They made a lot of progress. Immediately, a ton of money came in to change all that. And it's a tough fight, especially when you think that it's a good idea to embrace industry to try to make some of these changes, and then you realize industry then turns around and just dumps a ton of money on you. It's everywhere. It's not just food. It's everywhere. But yeah, we're up against it. But I think that once Washington doesn't lead, and this is something you learn very quickly. They don't take the lead on anything. They follow the will of the people, and so you kind of have to work both sides. That's why, on one side, you have to educate the public as to why. So take something really simple in concept. Why in this country calories are cheap, nutrition's expensive, right? And so you say, yeah, a lot of people are shaking their heads, yeah. Okay, so you gotta ask yourself why. Well, our tax dollars go to subsidize everything that goes into making highly processed fast foods. Corn, wheat, soy, cotton. $24 billion a year go into the subsidy program. 85% goes to the commodity crops, 15% goes to meat and dairy, 1%. It's actually changed a little bit now, maybe it's like 3 or 4% go to specialty crops, otherwise known as fruits and vegetables. And so then you ask, now it's pretty easy to see why a fast food burger costs less money than a head of broccoli. All our tax dollars are going to pay for this. And so then you realize this is why unhealthy food is cheap. So then you ask yourself, well, how easy is to demonize someone who's struggling and say, well, look, they're just feeding their kids soda and fast food. Why? Because it's cheap. And yet we're paying for it in healthcare costs. And yet the problem that we have is that our leaders don't want to look long term. They want to look short term, election to election. And so again, I preface this by saying they won't do anything, they will not lead. We have to actually drag them along. And so any movement, again, any of these movements that we talked about, it didn't happen, the marriage equality didn't happen because a bunch of straight people decided that, you know, gay people should get married. No, stakeholders need to actually find their voice here. Same thing with the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement didn't happen because a bunch of white people decided that black people should have civil rights. Completely the other way around. And so we have to, as stakeholders, as people who really care about the health of this nation, start demanding that we find solutions and find a way to make healthy food more affordable. And so I have this, when it comes around school lunch, you know, I think we still have a long way to go, especially when you realize that 30 million kids actually eat lunch, breakfast and lunch in the school cafeterias. And we have summer feeding programs and things like that. And yet we're feeding junk. And so my feeling is that will change when 500,000 to 1 million kids march on Washington and demand a better lunch.
But it has actually gotten dramatically better.
It's gotten better, not dramatically. It's gotten better.
Okay.
The standards are higher now, but there's a big push to actually change that.
Sure.
But I still think we have a long way to go. You know, the argument that you hear in a lot of school districts are the food's so bad the kids won't eat it. It's going in the garbage. It's actually not true. More kids are eating more fruits and vegetables, but it can get better. And so, but I think it'll only get better when kids actually and drag their parents along and start demanding it. The same thing with, you know, these other issues that we really care about. And so we have to lead, and they'll follow. Again, one of the first things I said, when a politician feels they'll lose their job over the way they vote or what they're not doing or their inaction, that's when things start to change.
And with the subsidies, though, I mean, this is a part of a very large piece of legislation, the Farm Bill, right?
Yeah.
And many people have been working on this, changing this, trying to undo these subsidies for a long time, and it has been a slow, grinding process. But what do you think the prospects are for the next Farm Bill in taking these things apart?
Yeah, so what's interesting, so when you talk about subsidies, they used to be direct payments, and it's changed a little bit now. It's insurance, but it's not insurance the way we know insurance. It's actually ensuring a guaranteed price or at least a floor. Sometimes you have to find, you don't realize who your partners are. And in this fight on subsidies, actually Tea Party Republicans are actually the partners you want to find because they want to get rid of them too. The Heritage Foundation wants to get rid of subsidies. And so typically you find that you're fighting against one side or another, and you'll find that if you actually start to look around, you'll find partners. But again, I think that's where, because we're so polarized right now, we're not finding those natural allies that are there.
And I mean, what are you hearing from the major corn and soy producers?
I don't hear anything from them. They don't want to talk to me. They're going to fight for every dollar they can get. I think, for instance, so good food policy, transitions. So right now, organics are exploding. We can't actually provide enough raw materials for the organic industry. And so there's a ton of farmers out there that like to change, but during those 3 years, during that transition, they can't if they're farming using organic methods, it costs more money, but they can't realize those prices. And so in the Farm Bill, last Farm Bill, there was a small amount of money put in for transitions. We can greatly expand that and then hopefully move some of those farmers over. Right now, commodity crops are at all-time low. Farmers are getting killed. And what that does is a lot of people start selling off their farms. It goes to even larger ag interests, and we start really losing our family farms that we used to have in this country. And so that transition, that's good food policy. So that's something that we could fight for. And I think it sounds like a lot of people are actually starting to focus on that one issue.
And what about moving some of these subsidies over to the specialty vegetables?
Well, again, last Farm Bill, we got a little bit more, and I think we need more. But the fruit and vegetable farmers that I talk to, they just would rather eliminate them, not move them over. They don't want subsidies. They just want to be able to play at a level playing field. But then again, you get really deep down a rabbit hole because a lot of these subsidies are actually just meant so we can actually be more competitive against foreign countries. So it just gets really bogged down. Anyway.
So you are involved with some races this fall, right? Some state level congressional
We
races.
are. I can't say yet. We'll announce it very soon, but we are looking at we don't have a lot of money food policy action, so we can't get heavily involved in races. It's amazing how much money actually gets thrown around with these races.
I mean,
so we're targeting 2.5,
okay.
And I can't say which races they are.
Now, I mean, given that the food movement did start out as an elitist thing, and we know there are many wealthy people out there who are passionate about this issue, why is it so hard to raise money for you? It seems like in theory you could build a big PAC. Yeah,
again, because I think we still have a lot of education. We still have to educate the public as to why these food issues are so important. We'll get small donors. We'll get a lot of small donors. We'll get a few. We get some foundation money. Actually, it goes into our C3, not the C4. But I think there's a lot of people that for instance, there is a lot of people that will fund anti-hunger organizations, but they haven't looked at us in terms of what we're doing to fight hunger or to change hunger, to change the face of hunger. So we're actually launching an anti-hunger campaign. Hopefully, we're looking at either November or the first of the year to launch. Again, just really trying to educate the public about who's hungry, why they're hungry, and what we can do to fix the issue, as opposed to what we currently have. Mm-hmm.
And so, it's very difficult. It sounds like doing this work in DC. But what keeps you coming back? You also said you also.
I'm not running for office.
Not really a fan.
No desire to run for office, because I guess you find yourself and you have a certain amount of celebrity, and you can either use it for good or you can just go to bars and dance on tables or something. I don't know. I just at a certain point I realized that I had a soapbox, and I decided that I wanted to use it for things that I really cared about, maybe part of it's a challenge. I don't know. Maybe I like the challenge. It's hard to say, but you know, I'm committed to it. I'm not going to back off. You know, I get the usual, you know, stay in the kitchen. Okay, I'll stay in the kitchen and pile my pots and pans as high as I can and stand on top of them and scream.
Are they still saying that to you? And
yeah, you get it. But you know, for me, listen, I'm a citizen, and this is how you exercise your democratic right. This is why we fight wars, so people like me and people like anybody here can actually, you know, have a voice and find a voice. This is who we are. No, I'll keep going until I can't do it anymore. Yeah.
Okay. Well, ready to take a question, but this is actually dead. Sorry, the iPad. Can you? Okay. Great.
Wow.
Okay. If DC operates in the long term, what are some of the smaller victories that can be worked towards in the now to sustain momentum and encourage progress?
Mm-hmm. You know, again, small things like that transition, trying to get more money for transition. I think there's another organization called Wholesome Way that did a really great job. They have a program called the Double Up program, where if you are using food stamp dollars in farmers markets, you actually get double the amount. So if you spend $40 on fruits and vegetables, you get a coupon for an additional $40. That was actually written into the Farm Bill. So that's some progress. Can we expand the next Farm Bill? Hopefully. It's been very, very successful. Making sure that some of these subsidies, again, we're not going to get rid of the subsidy program, but tying some of these subsidies more towards conservation. Big deal. That's something that we can do. So yeah, those are just a few examples.
Okay, and one last question. How do we leverage interest in food to build respect for the people that grow and cook it, including farm workers and cooks, many of whom are immigrants?
Mm-hmm. Again, this is something that we're fighting for. Look at the Immokalee tomato growers, you know, the work they did down there where they actually managed to get 1 cent more per bushel was a big deal. In fact, I saw something yesterday. I think the only fast food holdout that is not buying the tomatoes from them is Wendy's. Mm-hmm. And I just saw something that they're actually suing Wendy's for not actually participating in this program, which is a very strange way to go about it, but who knows if it's going to work. But yeah, I think that, listen, there's a huge push right now with fast food workers around $15 an hour. You know, again, that if you look at that's changed pretty quickly too. This idea that going from $7.50 to $15 an hour 3 years ago would have been unheard of, and just you see the power that people have when they actually band together and start you know, working towards change. And so yeah, I think there's I'm trying to look at that question again. I don't know if I see
How do we leverage and interest in the food movement to build respect for these people?
There's a lot of people. Now, immigration, we still have to fix that problem, and that's something that we're also focused on. You know, I think too often we get bogged down into whether or not we should actually have a path to citizenship, which I believe we should. But I think there's a first part of that is just making sure that people can come here and work and actually have all the protections that you would have as a citizen without the right to vote. And eventually that should happen too. But I think that that would be really helpful. You go around to any farm in this country, they cannot find people. I live in New York, but I have a house out in Long Island in the farming area. And they cannot get people to pick vegetables. They can't get people to actually work the fields. And this is happening everywhere. You hear in Florida, the tomato fields, tomatoes just rotting on the vine because there's no one there to pick them. You know, and this is when it's going to start to change, when there's business interests that really need immigration in a big way, and then they're going to start they'll force Congress to do something.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Tom. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.